Hello and welcome to a new video. In the last video, I was talking about how you can create a Wikidata sheet or a Wikidata item for a historic building, but we only put in the bare minimum of detail, mostly geographical data and so on, but you can actually do a lot more, and I want to show you that in this one. We will use a different building, Church Clara Church in County Kilkenny, which I have visited yesterday and taken lots of pictures, which you will also find on Wikimedia. You can see it still lacks the OpenStreetMap Way ID. That's really bad of me not to have added that, but it has the Sites and Monuments Records number and quite a bit of different information that I hadn't used in the previous video, which was about a tower house. If at some point you are wondering why my mouse pointing and stuff is not in sync with what I'm talking about, it's because I recorded the whole video, I went in to edit it, and there was no audio whatsoever. So I had to sit down, watch the whole video, and try to comment on what I was seeing, trying to recollect what I had said before, which did not always work out in sync. So hopefully you have a halfway decent video to watch now. Sorry about that. So what you can add is, for example, a start date for when that building was built, which you probably won't know for medieval buildings, not an exact year. You will get that for the postmodern buildings, maybe because there's a date over the door or somewhere. I just wanted to mention that. And the property you use is called Inception, but if you don't remember that for some reason, you can just type in start and it will suggest Inception to you anyways. And then you give it the year it was built. If you have a closer date than that, that's fine too. There is also an opening date, which probably wouldn't be applicable to any historic buildings. But I'm just mentioning that because it says it there. So that would be one. If you have an end date, there's a way to record that as well, if it was completely demolished at a certain date or year. The next one we can do then is the architectural style, which you can either read about somewhere or you know it by looking at it. So this church is following the Romanesque style and also the Gothic style, but I'm just going to put in Romanesque architecture. There is no Hiberno-Romanesque in this one, so you just have to go with Romanesque, which is fine because it is a European movement anyway, and Hiberno-Romanesque, as I've recently heard, is an outdated term, so just go with Romanesque, it'll be grand. And you can always add more using add value. And I don't have a reference for this rather than just recognizing that it is Romanesque from looking at the window. So as a source, I use stated in and then local knowledge. And there's two options for that. And I chose the one that sounded more personal. I might not be as authoritative as a book, but also books make mistakes, not the books themselves, the authors. And then what I'm going to focus on is the statement or property has parts, and it already shows you there that it has ohm stones. So the church has 2 ohm stones built into its walls. One is underneath the east window, and one is built into the north wall, not far from the remains of the doorway. And that was the second one to be discovered, as far as I'm aware. That's why it has Church Clara 2 on it. And most of them have their own Wikidata entries because a friend of mine, Florian, he has done all of that for the ohm stones in Ireland. So you should find them using the SMR number, hopefully. I haven't checked all of them. But of course, a church has a lot more parts than just ohm stones, and also most churches don't have ohm stones. And I've added the made from material information as well, so it's mostly built from limestone using lime mortar, not earth mortar. I made sure to check several locations. So most churches will have a chancel because the priest has to stand somewhere and the altar has to be somewhere. So you just type in chancel and find the right entry for that. And then also a lot of churches will have a nave where the congregation gathers. Used to stand in the Middle Ages, and just choose the right one again, using the definitions given. And then some churches, the bigger ones, especially cathedrals, they will have aisles as well, a north aisle and or a south aisle. And again, make sure you choose the right one. In this case, they just describe it as architectural element. I think they could have done better there. Or I guess I could go in and try to do better, because it is all open data and it can be edited by anyone with an account. I think it'd be more useful if it had a better definition there. What I'm wondering is, can it do south aisle and north aisle? But it doesn't seem to be, so you'll have to just go with aisle. And then in the qualifiers, add the cardinal direction. So for the south aisle, you just use the qualifier cardinal direction and then south, and for the north aisle, you use north. But this church doesn't have either, so I just have to cancel that. A church could, of course, also have a transept, which this church does not have. So I can't fill that in. But the bigger churches, collegiate churches, and cathedrals usually have a transept. Again, a north and a south one. Then a lot of churches had, or probably all of them, had a piscina where the holy water was put in after use. And in this case, the church used to have one, but it's been taken out of the wall, so it's just a gaping hole in the wall, which I will show you. So you can use the qualifiers state of conservation, demolished or destroyed. If it was just ruinous, if only just parts were missing, you could use the qualifier ruinous. But in this case, it is actually demolished or destroyed, and I can show you a picture of that. If I didn't have the tab already open, I could use the link on the data sheet there to open the category. I have made a subcategory for the interior of the church because it's just tidier that way. And I just have to find a photograph of the piscina there, or where the piscina used to be. So this is what it looked like yesterday, with all the vegetation removed, all the biological colonization removed, and some dirt left in it. And I have another photograph that I took some years ago, I can't remember, 2024 or 2023, where the piscina itself is a bit tidier, but the area around is still very overgrown. So all the ivy has been taken down and the trees growing in the church and all that, so that's a positive. You can actually see the church now. So I added 40-something photographs of the church if you want to check that out on Wikimedia. So that's the piscina, or where it used to be, and there we have just a shot of the east window. You can see the round arch, so it's clearly Romanesque. And then a lot of churches would also have an ombry, which is a recess in the wall, a little niche to store things in. This church, I haven't found where that was. It's often in the same wall as the piscina, but it doesn't have to be. But you could add that under has parts if it's still there, or if you can see the gaping hole where it used to be. There's different spellings. I usually use the more French one with the U, but you can also just spell it Ambry. Ombry, as long as you know how to pronounce it. I hope I know how to pronounce it. And again, you could use the state of conservation qualifiers there as well. A lot of churches, larger churches, like collegiate churches and monastic churches, will have a sedilia as well, where the clergy would sit during Mass. This little parish church obviously does not, but there are plenty still around that do have them, and they could be in all kinds of states of conservation as well. Not sure where it is here. Oh yeah, it's just the second one. Silly me. I'm not entirely sure if it is limited to Catholic clergy. maybe there's just not enough Protestant people to sit in the Sidilias. Usually people who do the reading just come up from the congregation. So I can fill that in here for this church. What they can also have is ante, and I'll show you a picture of what that is if I can find it. There are architectural elements on the exterior of a church. On a gable, in this case it's the east gable, and this is an older picture from 2023, I think, where the vegetation is still there. But you can hopefully see there's these protruding parts. They're kind of like as if the north and the south wall had extruded towards the east, and the ohm stone is just there under the window. I can blow this up. You can actually see the ohm maybe on it there. Unfortunately blocked up a little by those gravestones. But the ante, which is the plural, are there, and the other side, made mostly from limestone. One has a few little other stones maybe, or maybe they're just corroded in a different way for some reason. So the singular is anta, and the plural is ante, but you would use the singular, and I think you have to type in anta in brackets architecture to find it, because there's just so many other words starting with anta, it'll take too long to find, and it's not prioritized. And again, we could use a qualifier for the quantity because it has two. Might be interesting to know that it had two. Usually they came in pairs, but one might be gone for some reason. And what they also often have are buttresses. This church does have two buttresses. I'm just trying to find the photograph to prove that it does. That's the trouble when you take so many photographs, you can't find the one that you're looking for. So this is the buttress against the north wall, the west gable north wall, and you can see it's partly collapsed and it is just massive. My ranging rods are 1 meter long each, so each unit is 20 centimeters, so you can see how thick a wall that is. But it is collapsed. The other one is in a slightly better shape, but you can add that as buttress and also the quantity. You could also separate it in one that is ruinous and one that isn't, if you want to be really precise. And add the cardinal directions again. But this is a lot more information that we didn't have beforehand, which makes the data sheet a lot more useful, I think. I haven't ever done this for any church in that much detail, to be honest. I just wanted to show you. Now, this, of course, was all about churches, and tower houses are a little bit different. Tower houses and castles in general have different parts, for example, murder holes and crenellations and maculations and mural staircases. Some churches have those as well, if the priest lived above. But one of the things I like to add or look into are drawbar slots. And most castles have them because there are defensive structures, residential and defensive, and they'll have them maybe in more than just one doorway on different levels in the tower house. But churches also have them, and I still haven't quite figured out why, because you only lock them from the inside. Why would you have to lock yourself in for service? Sometimes if the priest lives either above in the loft or in a building adjoining that you can only reach through the church, it makes sense, like in Kilfane. But I like to add that I've done a video about it on how to map it on OpenStreetMap. You can watch that, where I give the example from Kilfane Church to have the visual a bit more. But it's a recess in the wall. It's usually kind of square shaped, and it's a deep recess. It can be about 1 meter deep, and the drawbar is just pushed in there for when the door is not bolted. And when they want to bolt the door, they pull it out and it goes across the doorway into a recess in the opposite wall in the door jamb, with a not as deep recess just to hold it in place. They can actually be breached fairly easily, apparently. There have been studies, I think, at Queen's University. But I think it's interesting to look at this in churches and figure out why they felt the need to barricade themselves inside for service or other reasons. I don't know. So you can add that here as well, and you could probably also do quantity again. Some doorways have more than one, and also churches might have more than one doorway. I'll show you a picture here from Church Clara Church. It's in the interior photographs somewhere. It's an older photograph that I took in 2023. I'll just blow up the image there so you can see it better. So that's what's remaining of the doorway. The door jamb is not an awful lot. It goes a little bit higher than that, but not much. But you can already see, hopefully, in the center of the image, the deep hole there. The dropper slot, and there's also a smaller one, but that might just be for a metal bolt. And as I said, sometimes they have more than one. This only seems to have the one big one. So this is in the north wall. There would have been a doorway in the south wall as well, probably also with a drawbar slot, because it makes no sense just to bolt up one door. So this is something you could also add. And why are we doing all this? Why not put it all in the description? Because if you have all these separate data points, you can search for them using the Wikidata query. So if someone in an ideal world where all this information was on Wikidata, which it isn't, came along and wanted to search for all the churches with drawbar slots, they could use this in the query, which you can't do if you only have it in the description. And it's also very detailed information that probably shouldn't be in the detailed description up on top. If you want to write a text about the building, use Wikipedia. Wikidata is not the place for that, but you can use someone else's data sheet from Wikidata of that building to give you a few pointers. And of course, you can use all the images on Wikimedia. That's what it's all about. Hopefully you found this interesting and maybe inspiring, and maybe you'll look at the next church differently. Sometimes I have that effect. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you soon again in another video, maybe even about mapping again. Who knows? Slán go fóill.